Hello and welcome to the Final Bell, the official Geelong Cats podcast. We are brought to you by Lake Imaging, as we are every single week. It is great to be with you. It is certainly great to be with you on this podcast after a terrific win against the reigning premiers. And no matter what anyone says, when you do lose to a team in a grand final, it never quite replaces it, but it does feel good knocking off that team the next couple of times you play them. And that's exactly what Geelong has done with a pretty comprehensive win on Sunday afternoon at the MCG. Scotty Gallen is still in Japan enjoying the Tokyo Olympics, and aren't the Aussies doing very, very well, especially in the pool. Ariana Titmus's swim yesterday was an absolute highlight. Had all the kids in my household going completely nuts. So hopefully Scotty's over there enjoying it. And while he is, we are very, very lucky to have Lachie Young from the Geelong Advertiser with us. Lachie, great to have you with us again.
Yeah, thanks, Lingy. That was a superb swim from Ariane Titmus yesterday, wasn't it? Just really got the juices flowing. And I absolutely loved the celebration from her coach. And It reminded me just a little bit of a particular Geelong coach in the coach's box and some of the celebrations we've seen from him. But great to see the Aussies doing well. And as you said, always nice when you can get one over the reigning premiers as well.
Absolutely. You're talking Chris Scott, Gary Rowan after the goal siren against the Dogs. Had a little bit of comparison to the celebrations of Ariana's coach. I loved to pump up one of my colleagues at Channel 7, Basil Zemplis' line. Credit to him the way he nailed it, but also it so accurately portrayed the moment of to become a legend, you've got to beat a legend. And Katie Ledecky is certainly that. Probably not arguably, I would say the greatest women's swimmer in history, in Olympic history. And for Titmus to knock her off in a brilliant race. Well done. I'm an Olympics fan, an unabashed Olympics fan, and I'm trying to get my kids hooked on it as well. They're watching it every opportunity, in between the homeschooling, of course. But we're here to talk footy. We're going to talk with Josh Jenkins in a sec. He's coming up after the break. We're going to answer the fans' questions, our listeners' questions out there, as we'd like to do every single week, Lachie. But let's jump straight into Sunday afternoon. It was, yes, the second half was a little bit of a 0-0 draw. But that second quarter in particular, and the first half, I think the first quarter set up the second quarter, was extremely impressive. And well, we don't want to pump each other up too much here, Lachie, but we did mention Asava Radigalea a lot on last week's podcast. And what a game he had. And the best thing was getting reward for all the hard work. I think the first quarter, he created 2 or 3 goals with his contest, and then he got the reward. It was a terrific game.
Yeah, you're spot on, Lingy. And I think when you have a look at Asava Radagalea's the type of game that he plays, he rarely gets that reward. So it was really nice for him to get some reward at the end and kick a few goals. But as you said, like there were a couple of times in that first half when he would go up for the ball, and I can't recall a time in Sunday's contest where he was outmarked at all. And so when he wasn't clunking them, he was bringing the ball to ground. And a couple of times he sort of realised that he wasn't going to be able to take the mark. And so he just sort of palmed the ball down nicely to someone at ground level, and that created another goal scoring opportunity. So that was great to see. And I'm sure that we'll touch on it a little bit later as well. But a guy that we spoke about last week, Quinton Narkle, came onto the ground during the third quarter as a sub. Didn't really need a lot of time to have some influence on that contest. Not great, of course, when you lose the skipper halfway during the third quarter, but when you can bring on a guy like Narkle, it's a fairly nice, handy replacement.
Back to the green vest days, Quinton Narkle is establishing himself as what would be the perfect sub. It is not those days, though. You could have somebody like him and his quality and potential impact sitting on the bench for the entire game, not getting a run, because perfect world, you don't get any injuries and you don't need to bring him on. He seems too good to be potentially sitting on the bench for an entire game and not having the impact he had on Sunday.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the issue that Geelong has, and you would much rather be in Geelong's situation where you're trying to find a way to get Quinton Narkle into the team or other guys who are on the fringe of senior selection than perhaps being in the situation of some other clubs where they're trying to find guys to actually bring in because their injury list runs so deep. But I think every time that Quinton Narkle gets his opportunity, he shows the football world just how much he can contribute when he gets that chance. So it was great to see again.
No doubt about that. I completely agree with you. Tom Stewart, again, excellent. Brandon Parfitt, I thought, again, excellent with a lot of the hard work that sometimes goes unheralded. Two of the biggest names and biggest stars of Geelong. One, Tom Hawkins, brilliant. Just that, as he does every time he plays. He is a commanding presence. He's a selfless presence, and he nails the big shots just when the game was still on the line. But I want to jump straight to the superstar, Patrick Dangerfield, with missing suspension and then a big chunk with injury. His first 2 or 3 games back were scratchy and didn't have that explosion, and just a little bit of the touch wasn't there. Built some form, certainly over the next couple of weeks, but that game on the weekend by Paddy Dangerfield, that was vintage Dangerfield, wasn't it? He was supreme in the air, on the ground. Influence was absolute.
Yeah, and so we touched on this, Lingy, the game against Fremantle with Gary Rowan out of the team. He spent a little bit more time forward of centre, and with Gary Rowan back in the side on Sunday, it allowed him to drift more into the midfield, but still have an impact when he went forward as well. And I think we tend to focus a lot on the really classy aspects of Paddy Dangerfield's game and that power element, but when Quinton Narkle kicked that goal in the second half, that goal doesn't happen if Paddy Dangerfield doesn't put his body on the line to lay that or to affect that smother that allowed the ball to spill free. Now, at that point, Geelong was in command of the game, but when you see your superstars putting in those sorts of efforts, that makes every other player in the 22 or the 23, as it may be, just sort of stand up and go, well, hang on a second. If it's good enough for Pat Dangerfield to be doing that, well, then it's time for me to do it as well. And I think it's those sorts of inspiring acts that really make him that player. We highlight, again, all of the brilliant things that he does, and he was certainly back to that on Sunday against Richmond. And to be honest, he was probably back there the game against Essendon a few weeks ago. It took him just a little bit of time to get back to that level, but he was superb again on Sunday.
He certainly was. As I said, we're going to get to Josh Jenkins as our guest in about 5 minutes' time, so looking forward to having a chat with him. Before we do, you've always got your ear to the ground. I was reading a worrying article about Brian Myers. Obviously missed a chunk of time with a hairline fracture in the fibula. Has he done it again? Do we know much more about Brian? He could be the only. I mean, Joel Selwood, we think is just a corky, and the way the skin plays, he'll be fine. But Brian's the big worry.
Yeah, so as we sort of sit here on our Zoom meeting, Lingy, it would appear that Geelong is going to be looking at all of its options for Brian Myers in terms of the damage that's been done and what options it has moving forward with regards to any surgery or intervention that might need to happen there for him. But it certainly does appear as though he has re-injured that leg. Now, the extent of the damage, we will need to wait to see, and what that means in terms of his ability to get back for finals. Again, we'll just have to wait and see. But it's horrible news for Brian Myers, who, again, he's a player. He's an impact player. And while Geelong does have some guys who can come in and play a role that Brian might play, you certainly don't like injuries at any time, but particularly this deep into the season.
And was looking as sharp and as creative as he was at times last year, and was just excellent the way he played on the weekend. So that would be a big blow for the team, and of course for him as well. He played such a chunk of games, I think just over 50 without interruption, and now to have back-to-back injuries is a shame for him. I'm sure somebody else, maybe that's Quinton Narkle, gets the permanent spot in the team, and then somebody else comes in as the sub. We'll wait and see on that one. The game on the weekend, North Melbourne versus Geelong in Tasmania. do we have certainty? It is definitely in Tasmania. Is that correct, Lachie? And day and time, is that all locked away?
It appears to be, Lingy. Now, you've got a situation where you've got two Victorian teams both flying down to Tasmania this weekend to play a game of footy, which I think caught the eye of the Geelong coach, Chris Scott, who said that he was a little bit bemused. I think I might be paraphrasing there, but it was a little bit.
I think bemused was the word that was used.
Yeah. So, but look, I mean, from a personal point of view, Ling, I'm really disappointed that I won't be able to go down there to actually cover the game, because it's a great little spot, Tasmania, for a weekend away. And I think it's the first time that Geelong might have played down there for premiership points. I covered a game, a pre-season game against Hawthorn there maybe 4 years ago, I think. And
am I right in saying, Lachie, the last time they played there I was still running around. Was it the round 4-ish 2007 against the Hawks, which wasn't Hobart, obviously Launceston, but last time we played a home and away game in Tassie?
Yeah, I think you're right, Lingy. So this would be the first time in Hobart. I think that
must be right.
That's correct. But yeah, you're right. It's been a long time, mostly because those Geelong Hawthorn games became so big that they were just always at the MCG for such a long time. But yeah, as we sit here again, Lingy, things can change very quickly in the world we live in at the moment. But yeah, that's locked in for Tassie on Saturday.
Excellent. I want to cover a little bit more of that a little bit later on, and we're going to get to and some of the listener questions as well. I want to take a break because Josh Jenkins has just appeared up on our screen. We're still doing this via Zoom, as most people are, even with I think we're all a little bit excited too, parents of young kids, about the announcement today that kids are going back to school. But we are doing this via Zoom. Josh Jenkins' face has appeared on our screen, so we are going to get to him. Let's take a break and chat with Josh Jenkins on the other side of the break. Welcome back. It is great to have you with us on To the Final Bell, brought to you by Lake Imaging. As promised, I did promise a guest, and he has joined us. Josh Jenkins is with us. Josh, hello.
How are we? Thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. No, we appreciate you being on. The build-up for you and potentially winning a spot back in the AFL is an interesting one from now on. We're just talking off air. So you played on the weekend in what we're going to call a practice match. It was Geelong versus Richmond, but I believe you had a few ring-ins on both teams.
Yeah, it was an interesting. You should never be surprised at what gets thrown at us in these times. And yeah, we played Geelong v Richmond effectively, plus a few Crows extras thrown in. So yeah, it was something new. We did a little bit last year up in Queensland, but yeah, it was a new experience. And the first half was pretty competitive, but it's sort of Richmond have got plenty of injuries, as we know, in their senior team, and they're a very young VFL team. So they got to about 14 goals to 2, and the sting went right out of it.
Always good when that happens. Did you say James Rowe, the young Adelaide forward? He was the one who was able to get on the end of a few, kick 5 or 6. But your form in the game, can you talk us through what you had to do for this game?
Yeah, we just for me, I was focused heavily, and I've been working closely with Shannon Neal, actually, who is a first-year tall. He's about 202 centimetres, a sensational athlete. I think wouldn't be out of place in the Olympics, actually. So he's a young guy I've been working closely with. So gave up the goal square, let him play out of the square, and he kicked 2 in the first 5 minutes. And I said, don't start thinking about bags, mate. I've been in this situation where you kick too early and you start thinking, well, I can smell 7 or 8 here. And funnily enough, he didn't kick another one for the day. So he didn't heed the advice. He kicked a couple early, and then the James Rowe show took over. So it was good fun. It was played in the right spirit. All 3 teams understood sort of what was at stake and what we were trying to achieve. Get some run in the legs and try and ensure that we're ready once, and hopefully if we can play VFL footy this week.
So, Josh, just with that, I mean, it's been pretty hard over the past 18 months for guys who are on sort of the fringe of senior selection, because you're not really getting that competitive type of football. You are playing football, but you're not playing for premiership points. So if we do see the VFL return on the weekend, how important is that for guys like yourself and the other blokes who are sort of around the edges of that senior team to be able to have some real competitive football again?
Yeah, it's crucial for everyone, because even the guys who you would say are still developing or aren't in the mix for an AFL spot, they're continuing to need to play against good players and in competitive games to get better. I think the value of the VFL in terms of development can get undersold a little bit. We talk about winning's not the first priority, but I think winning makes you want to come into work, and having a competitive game. On the weekend, it just. We had umpires and the scoreboard and that, but everyone knew there was nothing on the end of it. So, if that's a real game and you win a game as we did by 15 or 20 goals, everyone marches into work on Monday morning, whether you're trying to get a spot in the team or a young fella, and you feel good about yourself and you want to continue to get better and play footy in that sort of form. So, the guys who are around the mark, they're desperate to have real games. And last year was really tough. The guys who were on the fringes just didn't get a fair crack at it. The AFL team was going really well, and this is across the board, and there's just no real footy to be played. And I think there's something to be said for guys, and you guys would see it. Charlie Constable, for example, keeps putting up 35 touches week after week, and you say, well, we've got to find a way to get him in. And when they're practice matches, there's no stats, there's nothing like that. So, I'm from the outside, there's no pressure of, get this guy an opportunity. So even that's a small factor that plays a part as well.
So I asked this, Josh, with all due respect. Your form at VFL level in the first half of the season was absolutely superb. And I'm sure that there would be clubs around the competition who would be looking at their availability of players and saying, gosh, we could do with a Josh Jenkins playing in our team. But unfortunately for you, there's Jeremy Cameron, Tom Hawkins. We saw Asava Radigalia, for want of a better term, a breakout game. He's shown some signs through the year. But so it would appear from the outside, at least, that you're a little bit down the pecking order. As I said, I say this with all due respect, but have you had the conversation with the coaches about what it is that you would need to do, or what would need to happen for you to be given that opportunity at AFL level?
Yeah, I have. I work really closely, and I have a great relationship with Nigel Lappin, and we often speak quite frankly about everything. And I've sort of, I understand, and I'm well aware. And you didn't need to water it down a couple of times, because I'm more than comfortable with where my standing. I knew that coming here, Tom was already well established within the team, and speaking with Chris before I came to the club, he stated that the club wanted and needed to put a lot of development into Asava as well. And I still decided to come here because of the reputation of the club and the club's environment, and what I thought the club could provide for myself and my family. I've got 3 young kids, so footy was a part of it, but it wasn't the whole part. And it's just worked out that we happened to have another Coleman medalist in Jezza who was available in the trade period, and friends of mine were sitting around late in the trade period hoping he wouldn't arrive, but I was hoping he would. I'm just really comfortable that I've had 8 to 10 years where I haven't had to worry about getting a game or not. I knew I was going to be playing. So, this is just the ups and downs of a footy career. I started out as a rookie at the Bombers, where I didn't think I'd last more than a year. So, that was 12 years ago. So I don't stress it at all. I still try and, perform at VFL level where I can and put pressure on and be ready more than anything. So, if Tommy gets injured or does something, then I feel like I'm ready to go. But it is what it is. I don't stress it at all. And I could be playing AFL footy elsewhere, but again, I chose to come here. So I'm more than happy with the decision. I wouldn't change it.
Yeah, well, Josh, and you've already mentioned the fact that you're taking on a mentoring type role as well with someone like Shannon Neal and trying to grow that next generation, which is very selfless of you. If you don't mind, to explore the future, do you see yourself as continuing in the role that you're in right now, as there if needed, an absolute rock solid professional and could step in if needed, mentoring, perhaps even in the years to come? I remember the great VFL teams that we had over the years where James Byrne was just unbelievable for the young players. And a Troy Selwood did the same role. And you have those incredible VFL players. I'm talking in a couple of years' time. Or do you want to go and search that AFL opportunity again at one of those clubs who would desperately take you right now?
Yeah, I'm a little bit torn on that, Lingy. I'm not too sure. I don't need to be on an AFL list for the sake of it. So, if a club was to say, we really want you to be on the list, and if something happens to someone, you'll get a game. I'll probably just part ways with the game and be thankful for the opportunities that I did get. I look forward to the next phase of my life away from footy a fair bit. So, if I have to sink my teeth into that next year, then, I am looking forward. I am excited about that. And it provides different opportunities at home as well with your family, and you don't miss out on weekends and those sorts of things. But, you're retired for a long time, or you're retired forever. And, probably when I left Adelaide, I was probably thinking, I'm probably not going to play 200 games, but I'm going to get pretty close. And, I've only played 2 games in the last 2 years, and I would love to rewrite the last couple of years of my career, but it doesn't always work out that way. And at the end of the day, it's people talk about legacies, but I'm just another player who's come through the doors of a few clubs, and it's not going to matter to me, and I don't think it should matter to anyone whether you play 140, 150, 160. It's still a good career. So. I'm really unsure about it. If a club comes to me and says, we see you as a valuable part of our team, and you can play alongside a younger key forward and sort of complement them, then that's a different conversation. But for the time being, I'm completely unsure and pretty comfortable with it, which is, I guess, sounds a bit strange, but it's just the space that I'm living in.
We saw on the
sorry, Lachie, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, Josh, we saw on the weekend, we talked about Asava Radigali, but also young Max King at St Kilda and Nick Lachie at North Melbourne have pretty strong games in terms of their output on the scoreboard, but also Max King, I think it was 8 contested marks, which is only 2 shy of the all-time record. We see so much pressure put on young forwards coming through the ranks, and we've sort of seen that with Asava. A lot of people sort of saying, when's he going to have that breakout game? From your perspective, as someone who's sort of come through the ranks and been in that role as sort of that key forward and developing, do you think sometimes, Josh, that there is just a little bit too much expectation put on these young guys who are still developing into their bodies while they're trying to establish themselves as AFL footballers?
Yeah, absolutely. We sort of live in the now world. I want to find out, who's injured or who won the recent Olympics. I don't have to wait until tonight. I can just go on Twitter and find out now. And it's kind of the same with these young footballers. It's like, you used to be able to be out of sight, out of mind as a young any player, let alone a tall player. But you're out of sight, out of mind in the VFL or the SANFL or just developing a craft of training. And now it's everyone knows everything about all players, and the pressure's immense for these young guys to carry such a load. And to be honest, the way the game's played now, and this is probably a biased view from a forward's perspective, but even the best key forwards, aside from Hawke, who's such a consistent player, so many are up and down. Probably 2 good games out of 3, because the way the game's played, ball movement doesn't flow that well, scoring's down. Opportunities can be few and far between. So couple that with a young player who's developing, and when I say developing, their body's only part of it; it's their mind as well. Being able to stay focused. When I was a young forward, I used to really struggle with. I used to watch the clock a fair bit, because I used to get worried. It's been 6 minutes since I've had a touch. It's been 8 minutes. It's been 10 minutes, and often a lot of that's not your fault. The ball's up the other end. There's a lot of stoppages, whatever. But you get inside your own head a little bit, and that's the development part that a lot of the young guys, probably have to learn more so than their actual physical tools. Because they, King and Radigalia, the Ben King from Gold Coast, these guys are just physical freaks. They're all 200 centimetres. They can jump, they can run, but it's the mental side of the game which sometimes takes a little bit longer. And you see Hawke's no better athlete now than what he was 5 years ago, but mentally he just understands the game as good as any forward in the game.
Yeah.
It's really good point you make, and even using Hawke as the example. I mean, 2011, Lachie, you'd remember this. I think dropped from the team twice throughout the year. The cries from the fans were still, "Oh, he's no good," and this and then. This is Cats fans. His development took time, and we all, as Geelong fans, fondly remember that final series and that grand final. And then in his 6th season, he dominates the competition and has been, as Josh mentioned, one of the most consistent, dominant big forwards in the game for that period of time. But it took 5 years. So it's a really great point you make, Josh. I wonder, I know you're a big fan of American sport, and you've got a really good balanced view across multiple sports. When we're so many of us are accustomed to watching the American model and the NFL and the NBA, and I'm one of those. I'm a consumer of it. I feed off it. I love their draft. I love their build up to their draft. I love everything. But they have 4 years of college football or college basketball on most occasions, unless you're a freak like LeBron, you come straight out of high school. But that 4 years further physical, mental development, getting an education, everything you do, they are ready to hit the ground running and be a superstar almost immediately for the very best who are picked up. We expect that of our players, but they're only 18 years of age. Is our model right, do you think? And I suppose we don't have the college system like they have, but getting them at 18, is it too much to put on some of those people's shoulders?
Yeah, I got drafted with Dyson Heppel, who's never played a VFL game in his life and is the most mature guy you'll ever meet. But he's the exception. Joel Selwood's the exception. Most of us, 95% of us, I would say, sit in the group of being a little bit too immature for everything that the game throws at you. And it's not until, I've spent so much time with our young group at VFL level, training or traveling and playing, and you start to understand when you're a little bit older how much pressure some of these young guys place on themselves and how they're not able to deal with it, and also some of the challenges they have. I think about some of our young guys who have moved interstate and, particularly in this environment, they go home and they're very lonely and they don't have a lot of life skills. They don't have a lot of hobbies. They just haven't developed hobbies because their whole life has been about sport, school, and that's pretty much it. So, yeah, I think the more I've probably spent time with the state league teams, the more I've thought about the fact that perhaps a lot of these, almost all of these 18-year-olds could use some kind of academy or some kind of life skills year, a bit of a gap year where, you can draft them, but then you can stash them or send them, to play SANFL or VFL or whatever it may be, without the pressures of full-time footy program. Because, I know you want to get them in and fast track their development, but I think that, as I said, with the mental aspect of footy, the mental aspect of Monday to Fridays footy as well is a big challenge, and not until you experience that. And for a lot of guys, I think it can chew them up a little bit. And I was drafted at 21. There's no way I would have survived if I was drafted at 18 because I was just too immature. I wouldn't have been able to deal with everything the game threw at me. And that was in 2010. It's a lot different now in 2021. So, yeah, I'm with you. We don't have that system. But if we could bring some sort of program in where if you want to draft them when they're 18, that's fine, but you've sort of got to stash them for a year and let them grow as people before you bring them in and try and, be AFL players.
Lachie, have you got any last questions for Josh before we let him go?
I was just going to ask Josh, the Boomers,
yes,
you'll be following them, I'm sure. What are we? It's Tuesday at the moment. How are we going to go? What are we going to get a medal? And if so, what colour is it going to be?
If we don't get a medal, it has to be considered an epic failure. I know we haven't got one before, but Spain are a highly a fancy team. I think they're a bit they're quite old. Argentina are number 4 in the world. That they got wiped off the floor couple of days ago, and we've seen the Americans be vulnerable, and we've beaten the Americans, twice in the past 18 months. So I legitimately think we can win gold. I honestly think that, A, because of our team, but B, because of the way America's been constructed. Their roster leaves a lot to be desired. They haven't got enough shooters, they haven't got any playmakers, and they haven't got enough size. So, look, America deserves to be favourites, but if we don't play in the gold medal game, I'll be pretty surprised. And And, Paddy Mills, he just turned into Superman when he puts on the Boomers jersey. He just actually turns into one of the best players in the world. So I'll be following that closely, and I'll be watching the Opals tonight as well, Tuesday night. It will be good to see them kick off their campaign against Belgium. So I think both teams have got a really good chance to play off for gold and have a crack at it. So, I'm absolutely loving the Olympics at the moment. I'm happy to say I'm probably the number one Olympic cheerleader at the club.
Good work. Keep flying that flag. I'm with you on the Olympics. Josh, thank you so much for your insights today, for being so candid with us, and keep up the great work. Keep banging down that door, and that if that opportunity comes, I know you'll grab it with both hands. I think, Lachie, to those, the successful teams of the past decade, AFL teams I'm talking about, Richmond, and then the Doggies and the Hawks, and then us, a decade ago. Extremely good VFL teams with a host of players absolutely smashing down the door at all times. And Josh is certainly one of those players. So, Josh, all the very best. Hope it goes well for the rest of the season. Thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate the chat. It's been good.
Cheers, Josh.
Welcome back. It is great to have you with us on to the final bell. Brought to you by Lake Imaging, and really good to have a chat with Josh Jenkins there. It's getting some insights around someone who wants to play, can't wait to play AFL, doing everything he can to play AFL, Lachie, may not get that chance, but still preparing himself as though that chance may come.
Yeah, absolutely, Ling. It's been, as we touched on, it's been very difficult for some of those guys who are sort of on the outside of the AFL team the past 18 months. We know that there are clubs sharing resources just to be able to get a game of some sort underway. And so obviously on the weekend, some of the Adelaide players filtered into both the Geelong and the Richmond sides. But let's hope that the VFL is back this weekend and that they can continue that season, because I think Geelong would be, I suppose the other thing, Lingy, as well, is come finals time, you really need to have those depth players playing competitive football, because if there are injuries, and we hope that there aren't going to be any, but if there are, you need to have those guys sort of ready to go to come in who have played a good month to 6 weeks of solid competitive football and not just scratch match type of footy.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. We better get to your questions. Thank you to everyone who sent them in. We do love hearing from all of our listeners and all of the Cats fans out there. And how good the news, first of all, 70,000 members, a record for the Cats. Absolutely fantastic result for the Geelong Football Club. I can't believe that. That is a huge number. And well done to all the team. It's right across the board. Obviously, the membership department, but the marketing and in particular, some of the stuff that we're fortunate enough to do, Lachie, with the digital team and the content that gets out there to engage with the members, clearly has had a huge impact on the club achieving that 70,000 mark. It really is a wonderful achievement by all of the people who have been involved in that real connection to the Geelong members.
That's huge, Lingy, particularly in the environment that we live in. And obviously we're aware that there are some people who I suppose have been affected more so than others with these lockdowns, and who have been out of work but who still continue to put their hand into their pockets and support the club. So that's a huge result.
It is. Big thank you to all of those 70,000 plus members who've signed up. Hopefully 2021 is a very, very enjoyable year for them, and something special could be just around the corner. But question time. This is from Geelong Cats Nerd. Like the name. Following Sav's breakout performance on the weekend, he seemed to get better as his confidence grew. What impact does confidence have on your ability to consistently play at a high level? Lachie, that's straight away what I thought finishing that game. I was watching it at home with my boys. The smile on my face was very, very large because the Cats had just had a fantastic win. But I thought that exact point that the Geelong Cats Nerd asked, Sav, and we touched on a bit this last week about Sav. His ruck work was good. His follow-up work was good. At times he got the ball and was using his athleticism, but then didn't know what to do next because the game was still going a million miles an hour around him. And that's what happens when you're young and raw and inexperienced, and probably doesn't slow down to you 100+ games. But the confidence then of actually getting some reward for your hard work and kicking 4 goals and nailing a couple of good marks, doing the contest work early and then getting that reward. I think he comes out of that going, oh, okay. So everything I've been doing for the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it's been, at training and in games, it works. I should believe in it even more. And he'll start thinking, okay, so that preparation I do, that weights program I'm doing now is preparing me to be strong enough to take on the big ruckman, a beast like Toby Nankervis or a really strong key defender. That follow-up work I've been doing at training, that's helping. That timing of my marking, everything will just start building in his head. Okay, I'll do more of that. And he gets that affirmation. That's the way you become a really top-quality AFL player.
Yeah, I love that, Lingy, and I know that we tend to look to Tom Hawkins as the comparison for Asava, but you mentioned before that sort of 2011 final series and that grand final in particular against the Pies. Well, it probably doesn't surprise that then the next year Tom Hawkins goes out and wins the Cargegrave medal. He had that game against Hawthorn where he kicked the goal after the siren, which is always a fan favourite for Cats supporters. But so across the next 12 months, and this isn't to say that Asava is going to do exactly that, but you talk about confidence and what happens after that. There's a blueprint there, and let's hope that it's the start of something really special for Asava over the next sort of 8-9 weeks.
Absolutely. Next question from Sarah Scrassi, maybe. I apologise, Sarah, if I've probably butchered that, but thank you for your question. How often does the team train together in a normal week? I have no idea during the current and last 18 months of COVID, but let's pretend it's a normal week, shall we, Sarah? Saturday, playing against the Kangaroos, it's interstate, and then let's assume perhaps that the following week is Saturday as well. So Saturday to Saturday, I would say, so they spend a heap of time together. And Lachie, you'd know that when you're at the club and when there is more access for journalists, you see them, they're all together all the time, but they're all doing a lot of different individual programs. There'll be recovery. There'll be a main group meeting to review the game, but then there'll be lots of breakout meetings with midfields, forwards, backs, and then maybe some individual ones, and then maybe a group of 3, and then there'll be a touch session going on. There'll be the rehab group who are coming back from injury. Then there'll be maybe a group who needs a little bit of extra conditioning, maybe this is by Monday. Maybe they'll be doing a bit of light running and that sort of thing. A lot of individualized stuff while they're still all in the same building together. I would imagine now in a normal week, they would do one main training session a week together where they would look to be hitting 80% intensity and really building it. And there'd be some match play scenarios. And the other main one that they would do together would be the one later in the week, which would be touch, maybe a little bit quicker, but shorter with some specific tactical stuff. I'd still be right in saying, Lachie, that would be 2 sessions a week where they are all together on the training track rather than all being in the one building and complex doing a whole bunch of individualised stuff.
That sounds about right, Lingy. So they've got the main session, which tends to be in the middle of the week, and then what they call the captain's run, which would have been your domain back in 2011, later, or 2010 and 2011, later on in the week. So, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Lingy. You'd know more than I about that, but I reckon you've nailed it.
Excellent. Chad Bertrand, 7, asks, what time do players normally go to bed? Great question, Chad. It is as varied. What time do you go to bed, Lachie?
It's a little bit different in our household at the moment, Lingy, with a 15-month-old boy. It's changed dramatically in the past 15 months, but I tend to try to head off around about 9:30.
You're like
on
me.
a
You're like
normal
me,
night.
and early to bed. I was always extremely early to bed. I'd happily go to bed at 9 o'clock, 8:30 during the season when I was playing. And I love to sleep in too. Oh, don't worry, I could punch out 12 to 14 hours easy. Sleep was my specialty. There were players who, thinking of the Steve Johnson here, and I'm not talking about, going out on the weekend stuff, who just didn't want to sleep that much. Like he might go to bed at 11:30 during of a weekday. He'd just be up. He'd watch some TV. He'd be around at one of the boys' houses, just hanging out, maybe do whatever. He just would go to bed late. I'd imagine there'd be a lot of players in that boat, and then there'd be some players like us, Lachie, who loved their sleep and just wanted to get to bed at 9:30.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what life would be like as an AFL footballer. What you put your body through, it just seems extreme for people who have never been in that environment, and to go through all of that and then still be up late at night and then get up early to do it all again the next day. It wouldn't work for me, Lingy.
Nah. Well, I think Stevie'd always talk about to me. He goes, no, about 6-7 hours, that'd be enough. I remember a grand final, I think it was 2011. We stayed up in Melbourne. We had actually all 4 grand finals I played in. We'd stay in a hotel in Melbourne just to not have the fuss of traffic, getting there, all that sort of stuff. I think the bus left we had to be at the ground at, say, 12 o'clock. So the bus would have left probably, I think we were staying down the Spencer Street end, 11:30. I reckon I got up at about 10 o'clock on the morning of the grand final, having gone to bed at about 9 o'clock the night before.
Yeah.
Comfortably. And I love, 12, 13, 14 hours of sleep, especially the night before a game. That wasn't foreign to me. You're sort of mentally and physically so spent. When I was at the club, I was always just, let's get this done, let's do it well, mentally, whatever. Let's do this meeting right. Physically, let's do it right. I just crash and just sleep and punch out so many hours.
So that must have changed for you during fatherhood, though, Lingy. That must have changed.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't give right now for 14 hours of sleep, Lachie.
Oh, gosh.
Doormat 92 asks, apart from Blitz, who would be our best Olympic hopeful and in which sport? Tommy Hawkins was a star high jumper at high school.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me.
A meter. Oh, now I'm going back to the deep recesses of my memory here, but I thought a meter 92 or 93 when he was at high school.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. Maybe don't quote me on that one, but I know he was a very good high jumper. Who else maybe?
I think we mentioned last week that Geelong's probably got some of the best runners in the AFL. Guys like Mark O'Connor and Isaac Smith and Sam Menegola. In fact, actually, Sam Menegola may be on the road race on the bike. I know that he likes to get out on the bike and do some really long rides and some big Ks. So he'd be one maybe on the bike, Sam Menegola.
I do remember back. So this is peak. Oh no, so maybe not quite peak, but just before. So around 2009, Shane Mumford, when he was just as lean and as fit, and maybe about to go to the Swans, on the rowing machine. So granted, this isn't out in the water. He was smashing out, and I don't understand any of this, so please forgive my ignorance on it. He was smashing out kilowatts or stroke ratings or whatever that there were visiting AIS people who said we would take him right now and put him in a boat because he was elite in what he was doing with the rowing, and they would teach him the rowing technique with the big long levers, big long legs, and the builds that the rowers had. Mummy obviously got bigger, as in shoulders, and huge as the years went by, but I think when he first trimmed down, he was as lean and had that skinnier waist and everything. I think they wanted him for rowing. But I think Mummy liked smashing bodies a little bit too much.
Yeah, you can't be doing that while you're on the boat.
No. Last question. This one's from M Dance. Thank you for your question. Because we're playing in Hobart this weekend, Who is the greatest Tasmanian to play for the Cats? Lachie, if you don't notice, I do absolutely nothing on this podcast. It is our superstar Rowan Mackey, producer, who pretty much puts the whole thing together. So he straight away dug up some Tasmanian names for us who've played for the Cats. I'm going to throw them at you, and I want to know the greatest for the Cats. Here's a handful. Jake Kolajasny's from Launceston. John Devine, coach and player, was the only Geelong player named in Tasmania's top 40 players by Jeff Poulter from the Mercury. He played in the 1963 Premiership. Peter Street, Big Street, he's from Glenorchy. Jackson Thurlow also went to the Swans, he's from Launceston. Gary Davidson, who was also footy manager for a while, played 30 games for the Cats. Ryan Gardner, who's now on the Doggies list, from Burnie. We might be missing one or two, but hopefully we got the main ones.
Yeah, I've got a feeling, Lingy, that John Devine might have originally been from Colac and then went down and played in Tasmania. I think they might claim him as their own. But look, from that list, you would probably say, if we're going to rule out John Devine, maybe Jake Kolajasny, just off of that. Another one that...
Well, your research is very, very good too, Lachie. John Devine, place of birth was Colac, and then obviously played with the Cats, and then moved to play with North Hobart between 1967 and 1974.
Yeah.
And obviously then came back to coach the Cats. Remember that famous footage of him giving the big fire up as the boys sat around?
That's right.
You talked to some of his teammates, that 1963 Premiership. They reckon John Devine was one of the greatest blokes they'd ever played with. Just a fantastic, outstanding person and as hard as nails.
Yeah. Another one that came to mind, Lingy, was Adrian Fletcher. Now, I think he probably did more after his time at Geelong. I wouldn't know off the top of my head if he had even reached 50 games for the Cats. He might have, but I don't think he did. But
I'll try and give you those stats. That's a good pickup. 23 games for the Cats.
There you go. Yeah.
22 for St Kilda. 107 total for the combination of the Brisbane Bears / Brisbane Lions. And then 79 for Fremantle for a total of 231. And was also co-captain of Fremantle for 2 years.
I can remember growing up as a kid, Lingy, and you'd buy the paper to have a look at who were the leading disposal getters for the competition, and he would always be at the top of the handball list, Adrian Fletcher. His name would just always be there. So he was...
It'd be fair to say that his Geelong time was perhaps cut short just being second in line to Paul Couch. Couch obviously established as a phenomenal sentiment for the Cats. Fletch was probably going to play a similar role if he could get a spot there, and unfortunately realised behind Couchies, not where he wanted to be, so had to jump ship and played some very good footy at Brisbane and Fremantle as well.
Yeah, there's a few links to sort of Tasmania, like John Devine obviously went down there. I'm pretty sure, Lingy, that Darren Creswell was from Tasmania, and he spent a bit of time at the Cats.
A couple of years as coach, midfield coach. Yep.
And I'm pretty sure that he might have actually, that footage of him banging the knee back in after it had dislocated, I reckon that might have actually been at Kardinia Park when he was playing for the Swans.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
So he was a Tasmanian. Kolajasny seems to be the one that
seems to be the one. If we're saying John Devine, Colac boy, and then Tasmania heading to play footy in Tassie, maybe rule him ineligible. We'll give it to Collar then. Lachie, how's that sound?
Still yet to kick a goal as well.
Maybe it'll be this week. Maybe it'll be back in Tassie, the fresh, beautiful, natural air. Slot one, Collar. Sneak down. Get one for us all. Hey, before we go quickly, and thank you to everyone who sent the questions in. By the time this goes to air, I know actually Rowan is a star, Lachie, so he'll probably get this out before tonight. But tonight, as we're recording on a Tuesday, the AFLW draft, 6:45 p.m. Geelong, 4 picks inside the top 15. I think we mentioned last week maybe Georgie Prespakis being potential for the Cats top pick. What else are you hearing as whispers as potential picks for the Cats inside that top 15?
Yeah, so I think you've nailed that one, Lingy. That'll be who the Cats will go after with their first pick, which would be the second pick overall. And then with their remaining picks, I do know that there are a few of the Geelong Falcons girls who are in the mix. So whether or not they look to stay local, we'll have to wait and see. But with those 4 picks, you would think that maybe one of them at least would come from the Geelong Falcons girls. So there's a few in the mix there. Annie Lee, who's got a great story. She spent some of her childhood over in Scotland before coming back to Geelong. Ingrid Hootsma is another one who could potentially be in the mix. And also the daughter of a former Geelong Falcons ruckman who I think might have been a little bit before your time, Lingy, Peter Featherston. His daughter, Gabby, is another one who could be in the mix as well.
Yeah, I do remember that name. I think probably a couple of years before I was at the Falcons. I think he played a lot of footy down Apollo Bayway.
Yeah, that's right. Won a couple of medals down in the Colac League and tragically passed away in 2014 in a road incident. And his daughter Gabby has produced a really good season at the Geelong Falcons and for Vic Country. So would love to see her be able to do something that her father was unable to do.
Well, let's hope she gets picked up. Does she have his height? Is she a ruckman as well?
Yeah, so she's played a little bit of ruck, a little bit of key position. I guess the only thing would be as you sort of move through the ranks and up to AFLW level, you're sort of competing against some girls who might be a little bit bigger. So whether she ends up in that role or probably more sort of a high half forward perhaps, we'll have to wait and see. If there's another growth spurt, she might be able to play in the ruck, but we'll wait and see.
Well, good luck to all the girls tonight. Picked up right across the competition, but in particular to everyone who ends up at the Cats, and 4 picks inside that top 15, as I mentioned, makes it a really important draft. We know what last season produced. It was a tough year for the AFLW, for the Cats. Obviously looking to build under a new coach and a really good base has been set up and a development program by Paul Hood and some of the team there. So now with this draft, a really good opportunity to kick into hopefully some very, very successful years. Last thing I want to mention too, the Cats, for any fans out there who want to get some Cats memorabilia, the Cat Shop reopens 9 a.m. tomorrow, which is good, in line with some of the reopenings happening right across Victoria. Round 21 is Geelong round. For those who listen to the podcast regularly, Geelong is the Indigenous word for Geelong, for the local region. And obviously round 21, the Giants game at GMHBA Stadium. The Cats have got 3 games to finish the year. GMHBA Giants, the Saints and Melbourne. So there'll be plenty of fantastic Indigenous gear and the Geelong round gear and the Indigenous Guernseys available at the Cat Shop for those who want to get along. Saturday, as you said, it is locked in. It is in Tasmania and it is on Saturday afternoon. I'm just quickly scrambling to find out the time. It is 1:15 p.m. listed here at Blundstone Arena. Hopefully that won't change. The sterile corridor has been formed or whatever. It's amazing how many new different terms we've learned throughout COVID.
Unbelievable.
A sterile corridor between Victoria and Tasmania. Beautifully done. North are dangerous though, Lachie. Just on the last point.
Right.
Gee, they've improved. I know Carlton weren't much chop on the weekend, but I was doing that game for radio, and the Kangas have improved considerably from the first half of the year.
Yeah, there's no way at all, and I'm sure that this is the case every single week anyway. So I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, Lingy, but there is no way that Geelong is going to go down to Tasmania and take North Melbourne lightly. They are a team on the rise, and I think at the start of the year, there were probably some people questioning where North was at in terms of its rebuild and, the direction that it was heading under David Noble. But gosh, he's had them turned around very, very quickly. Maybe not against teams that are sort of pushing for premiership contention. So it's a real test for them. But at the same time, they play well down there. They'll have a little bit of confidence after their recent outings. So certainly, Geelong will need to be on its game on Saturday.
Absolutely. Looking forward to watching that one. Lachie, thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you, Lingy.
We will be back again next week, hopefully talking about another Cats win. To everybody, stay safe out there. To all those who are looking forward to their kids going back to school, enjoy tomorrow as you just push them out the door. I think I'm going to send my kids to school about 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. See you later, boys. No, on a serious note, everyone stay safe out there. We will be back next week to talk more footy. Thanks a lot.